Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Blue Wave. I'm your host, Max Lopez. Got a great show for you today, as always. The U.S. religious right messaging on LGBTQ issues affects the entire world, and the world follows the U.S.'s leadership on many issues, but especially social issues. So we'll be looking at an article that highlights how the U.S.'s push to the right on the LGBTQ issues is affecting the rest of the world. Florida Democrats hosting a drag show in a jab at Desantis. Some good hardball politics here being played by the Democrats recently. Another example of that. Excuse me. Barbra Lee, Democratic lawmaker, missing the point on cluster bombs and why they're now being used in Ukraine. And I did a video on this in my last show, but I want to do another segment because I think a lot of people are missing the point about the use of cluster bombs in Ukraine. New Ron Desantis interview with Fox's Maria Bartiromo. I'm not sure if I said her last name right, but someone can correct me. DeSantis is just not looking very presidential at all recently, and recent interviews he's been doing have not been helping him out. And lastly, we're going to end out the week with I got to ask David Packman about the state of the GOP race. And yeah, it was awesome to meet and talk to one of my idols, David Packman, and I'm glad that I was able to ask him some questions, and he gives some interesting insight on the state of the GOP race as it is right now. But like I said, we'll be starting off with the U.S. religious right at center of anti-LGBTQ message pushed around the world. It's kind of a long article. I'm not going to read all of it. It's from The Guardian. When the U.S. evangelical preacher and anti-LGBTQ crusader Scott Lively landed in Uganda in 2009 to warn of the gay agenda, he was arriving after a series of culture war defeats at home. I need some water real quick. Give me 1 second, guys. That's better. All right. It says more and more U.S. states were recognizing same-sex marriage, and opinion polls were showing fewer and fewer Americans objected. Lively was there to offer Uganda's lawmakers some advice on how to drum up outrage, emphasize the issue of the homosexual recruitment of children, he advised. 5 years later, Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni signed a law that made same-sex relationships punishable by death, asserting that Western groups and gay people were coming into our schools and recruiting young children into homosexuality. As a wave of anti-LGBTQ plus legislation sweeps the U.S., some may hear echoes of Lively's messaging. Fine-tuned in Africa and elsewhere, arguments used to attack rights overseas have been re-imported to the U.S. as the religious right warns that the left and gay people are grooming 7-year-olds and promoting pedophilia. The spread across the world illustrates how America's evangelical and Catholic right has globalized over the past 15 years. By helping establish a vast web of anti-LGBTQ zealots who share ideas, messaging, and funding. So we got this feedback loop going here of harsher and harsher restrictions being pushed around the world at the advice of U.S. lawmakers, and then U.S. lawmakers then turn to these countries around the world and go, oh, look, they're changing their laws too. And look, they agree with us on these issues. And it's in fact the U.S. that is the outlier on these LGBTQ issues. So it kind of adds to their argument in that they're able to point to these countries and go, no, the U.S. is the extreme ones. Look how many other countries are following along what we're agreeing with. But it's all a charade, it's all a facade, because the source of the anti-LGBTQ laws around the world and the advice that the anti-LGBTQ leaders across the world leading these countries, pushing these laws on their people. They're getting advice from U.S. lawmakers, as the article just pointed out. And so we got this feedback loop going where the U.S. right points to authoritarian right-wing countries around the world, and it's emboldening and bolstering their argument here back at home. And so as things get worse and worse for the right, things get worse for LGBTQ people based on right-wing legislation here in the US, it's only going to continue to get worse in the rest of the world, and therefore will continue to get worse here in America because they're having their arguments emboldened. And this is what makes U.S. legislation and U.S. politics so important. And it's also what makes the Supreme Court decisions important as well, because the U.S. is looked to for leadership on these issues. And when LGBTQ rights were legalized in 2015, just like how when rights are restricted, it makes it worse for the rest of the world. When rights are expanded, it makes it also has an effect on the rest of the world. Look no further than Mexico's legalization of gay marriage and many other countries that legalized shortly after the United States legalized gay marriage in 2015. And now what we're seeing is people aren't happy about the legalization of gay marriage, and we're seeing the right-wing backlash against the issue here in the US, and we're also seeing how it's playing out across the whole world, like in places like Uganda, where now homosexuality is punishable by death. So this is a really important stuff here. And people that say they don't care about politics or they don't see how politics affects their life, it affects the entire world, what goes on here in the United States. And if we don't shore up the slippage of LGBTQ rights here in the US, I believe that we're going to continue to see a slide of LGBTQ rights across the world, unfortunately. In jab at DeSantis, Florida Democrats cap fundraising dinner with raucous drag show. This is awesome. I love this sort of hardball politics that the Democrats are starting to finally play. And I don't know why it took them so long. I don't know why we've played nice with them for so long. But rub this stuff in their faces. Show them how dumb it is to be against drag shows with all the issues in this country. Drag shows is a thing you're focused on. Show how harmless they can be. Show how fun they can be for the participants. And show how dumb it is that this is what you're going after. This. So in jab at DeSantis, Florida Democrats capped dinner with drag show. The speeches were done. The politicians were off stage. The night wasn't over for Florida Democrats. Party chair Nikki Fried feigned surprise when the lights went out Saturday night. The show was just getting started. For the finale of the Florida Democrat Party's annual Leadership Blue Conference and fundraiser, Fried arranged for an appearance by drag queen Velvet Linrow, who performed several numbers along with her backup dancers. The audience, Democratic activists and elected officials from throughout the state, erupted in applause. Lenore, 51, who lives in West Palm Beach, said she was happy to receive and accept the invitation to perform for all the political audience. She normally appears at Lips, Fort Lauderdale, which described itself as the ultimate in drag dining, and the Pub on the Drive, a bar in Wilton Manors. Drag, her full-time profession, has become a flashpoint in escalation of culture wars emphasized by Ron DeSantis and Republicans in the Florida legislature. They've asserted that drag is harmful for children, and the DeSantis administration has sought to punish liquor license holders that have held drag shows with children in attendance. There, DeSantis and the Republicans trying to say drag is a crime, and it's not, Lenore said. The final choice was intended as a political and cultural statement, Fried said afterwards, and also as a way to keep giving the 700 Democrats at the dinner an energy-filled send-off after a day of conferences and speeches at the Miami Beach. I'm not even going to... At the Fontainebleau. There we go. I tried to pronounce it. Earlier in the evening, between speeches, there was a performance by black dancers and a performance of salsa dancing. Awesome. Fried said the entertainment was designed to counter what she said were Republican attempts to erase the culture and history of the state. Great stuff here. I love this hardball politics. I love shoving it in the GOP's dumb, smug faces and showing just how harmless these events are and how silly it is that the Republicans, again, that this is what they're focused on. Drag shows, all the problems in the country, and drag shows is what the Republicans are worried about, folks. Drag shows. Let's keep rubbing it in their face. Let's keep having the drag shows at the end of however many fundraisers we can. Let's let them wallow in horror and scream, "Oh, the children! Ah, the children! Ah!" Who cares? They're going to do it anyways. Let's rub it in their faces. Awesome stuff here. Barbra Lee has denounced the use of cluster bombs in Ukraine. And I just want to play her interview here with Jake Tapper on CNN, and I'll give you some analysis on the other end of the interview.
Do you buy that argument? What's your response?
Nice being with you, Jake. No, cluster.
Sorry about that.
System they have.
What do you think? Do you buy that argument? What's your response?
Nice being with you, Jake. No, cluster bombs should never be used. That's crossing a line. Once you see what takes place, we know what takes place in terms of cluster bombs being very dangerous to civilians. They don't always immediately explode. Children can step on them. That's a line we should not cross. I think the president's been doing a good job managing this war, this Putin aggressive war against Ukraine, but I think that this should not happen. He had to ask for a waiver under the Foreign Assistance Act just to do it, because we have been preventing the use of cluster bombs since, I believe, 2010.
So when Putin started using cluster bombs, the Biden White House said that would potentially be a war crime. Do you think that, therefore, the U.S. government, the Biden administration, will potentially be engaging in war crimes if this goes forward?
What I think is that we would risk losing our moral leadership, because when you look at the fact that over 120 countries have signed the Convention on cluster munitions, saying they should never be used. And in fact, many of us have urged the administration to sign on to this convention. And so I'm hoping that the administration would reconsider this, because these are very dangerous bombs. They're dangerous weapons, and this is a line that I don't believe we should cross.
All right. So there's Democratic Representative Barbra Lee talking with Jake Tapper about why she doesn't think cluster bombs should be used. But here's the thing, okay? I agree that cluster bombs are terrible weapons in how effective they are. And I agree that civilians having to defuse unexploded munitions is a nightmare, okay? And the potential harm for civilians is there, and it's a nightmare that they would have to even worry about this, okay? But here's the thing. Ukraine doesn't want any bombs to be exploded in their homeland. If it was up to Ukraine, there would be 0 cluster bombs being exploded. There would be 0 normal artillery shells. There would be 0 Russian tanks and 0 Russian soldiers in their homeland trying to take away their country from the people. And Ukraine is, the civilians are the ones that are going to have to deal with the effects of these cluster bombs being used. And they're the ones that are going to have to go in and take care of the unexploded ordnance. And they're the ones, they're the ones still asking for these weapons to be provided. So I'm not sure why it's our place to tell Ukraine, oh no, we'll give you all this other stuff, but the cluster bombs, sorry, we're going to draw a line there. We're going to draw a line. Because if Russia takes over Ukraine, the effects for the civilians and the death and harm and destruction that will befall onto them if Russia is to have their way is going to far outweigh any negative effects of using cluster bombs. Okay, I point you to this article from Al Jazeera where it says photos. Grim exhumations continue at mass grave in Ukraine. Let's look at some of these pictures here. Okay, of mass graves that civilians are being put in by the Russian orcs who have conducted rape, they've conducted summary executions, they've conducted mass murder, they've conducted just awful, terrible death that they've inflicted upon the population. Now, these are some pictures. Now I'm going to bring up some statistics here. Number of civilian casualties in Ukraine during Russia's invasion, offered by OHCHR from February 22 to June 18th, 2023. 9,083 civilians killed, with 15,000 civilians injured. So, if Russia is to win the war, you can best believe that the number of civilians that are going to be killed is going to go up and up and up and up and up. Okay? And not only that, but civilians of other countries, because Putin's whole evil speech that he gave at the start of the war, that he basically stating that he wants to remake the USSR and redraw international boundaries. Not only does it pose a threat for Ukrainian civilians if Russia is to win, it poses a threat to other countries who used to be a part of the USSR and would be facing an emboldened Russia and a war-tested Russia who just beat Ukraine into submission. Well, now let's go try our hand at conquering a different country. What's the potential fallout and calculus for those civilians living in other countries? So if we need to use cluster bombs to ensure that the war is won and to ensure that the conflict is contained to Ukraine, yes, cluster bombs are awful. Yes, it would be better if we didn't have to use these bombs at all. But guess what? This isn't the United States going out and deciding that we're going to go bomb some country in the Middle East or in South America for United States interests. Okay? This is the one time that the U.S. is on the right side of an international conflict. Gee whiz, we can actually do it. We can be on the right side, believe it or not. This is the first time I can remember in maybe ever that the United States has been on the right side. But guess what? There would be no need for the United States to send any sort of munitions to Ukraine at all whatsoever if Russia didn't invade the country. And in terms of cluster bombs potentially harming Russian civilians or having causing damage to Russia, well, if Russia doesn't want to worry about their civilians potentially being dragged into this conflict, and if Russia doesn't want to worry about their country being attacked by Ukraine on their homeland. Well, guess what? They can withdraw their troops from Ukraine. Every single troop, every single tank could be withdrawn right now at the behest of Putin, and Ukraine is not going to suddenly now go decide to take over Russia because they were not acting aggressively in the first place. They were not acting aggressively at the start of the invasion. And I'm not talking about Crimea because that's a different issue. And if Ukraine feels emboldened to take Crimea back, I think that they are totally justified to. But yeah, Russia wouldn't have to be worrying about the threat to their civilians if they didn't invade the country. So this is a war of Putin's making, and it's a war of Putin's decision. And the U.S. is totally right and justified to give whatever munitions that we think is going to stop Putin's invasion from succeeding. We are totally justified to deliver. Ukraine is justified to ask for whatever they need. And it's any country is justified, as a matter of fact, to deliver these munitions. And yeah, I don't think it's our place as a country to decide what Ukraine should be defending their country with and what they shouldn't be defending with. Let's just give them whatever the heck they need to make sure that they're going to win the war, because Ukraine not winning the war signals an upending of the world order that would have consequences for countries outside of just Ukraine and would get us less peace in the long run and more bloodshed and more conflict in the region. So let's have less war, let's have more peace, let's win the war in Ukraine, and let's send Putin's army and Putin back to where they came from in Russia. What happened, says Fox News' Maria Bartiromo, as she confronts Ron DeSantis on his failure to launch in a blunt exchange. Wow. So Ron DeSantis' campaign, as we all know, has been sliding in recent weeks and months. And we're a far ways away from DeSantis being seen as a potential leader, a potential off-ramp of from Trumpism into more fascism, but not so on the nose, and a bit more, I guess a bit more kind of thinly veiled, and a sort of fascism that is disguised in just a different way than Trump does it. So, you know, DeSantis was seen as a candidate who could be leading the Republican Party as of right now, but it's not working out for him. Let's look at this interview real quick, and I'll have some commentary during the interview.
What's going on with your campaign? There was a lot of optimism about you running for president earlier in the year, but here's this weekend's headline from the Politico playbook: failure to launch. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' campaign to topple Donald Trump has stalled. We are way behind, says a top DeSantis PAC official, sounding the alarm. What happened?
I'm losing to Trump by 30 points. What a weirdo.
Oh, Maria, these are narratives. The media does not want me to be the nominee. I think that's very, very clear. Why? Because they know I'll beat Biden. But even more importantly, they know I will actually deliver on all these things. We will stop the invasion at the border. We'll take on the drug cartels. We'll curtail the administrative state. We'll get spending under control. We'll do all the things that they don't want to see done. And so they're going to continue doing the type of narrative. I can tell you, we understand this is a state-by-state process. We've had incredible support in the early states, building an organization, signing up the key people that you need to be able to compete in a place like Iowa. We just launched our Mamas movement. My wife was in Iowa with Governor Kim Reynolds launching that. Parents, and particularly moms, I think are going to be the secret weapon, both in this primary and in the general election. Nobody has been a better champion for those folks than me. And I would just also point out, my reelection in Florida, we had the greatest victory that any Republican governor candidate in the history of the state had. And yet a few months before the election, I had media saying that somehow my reelection campaign was stalling, that we weren't doing anything. And so we're doing what it takes to win. It's not a national primary. That's not how these things are going. It's really on the ground in those key states. You got to have the organization. You got to do it. So that's what we focused on. And oh, by the way, we just announced last week better fundraising than any non-incumbent has ever had. If you look at what was reported, it was about $150 million, and that hasn't even been deployed yet. So we've got a long way to go. I'm looking forward to being able to participate in the debates, but this is not something that I ever expected to just snap fingers and all of a sudden you win 7 months before anyone happens. You got to earn it, and you got to work, and it requires a lot of toil and tears and sweat, and we're going to do that.
So you.
Okay, here's the thing, Meatball Ron. Your polling in New Hampshire is not doing good, okay, at all. And given all of the things that have happened to Trump in the last few months, okay, the Alvin Bragg indictment, the Jack Smith indictment, now is the time when you would be hoping to at least be gaining on Trump at least a bit and not losing. Okay, so yes, Iowa caucuses, whatever. Okay, yeah, I get what he's saying about Iowa. It's got to be won on the ground, fight for every voter, yada yada yada. Okay, but an Iowa caucus win does not make you the GOP nominee. Okay, DeSantis could very well win Iowa. He could even, hell, let's give him New Hampshire. Let's say he wins Iowa and New Hampshire. Okay, guess what? Pete Buttigieg won Iowa in 2020. Okay, Ted Cruz won Iowa in 2016. Okay, winning Iowa does not make you the GOP frontrunner, and the fact that DeSantis has failed to consolidate anti-Trump support, and he has failed to distinguish himself in any meaningful way from Trump, means that all of the candidates who don't want Trump in the GOP, they're going to continue to be supporting this smattering of candidates. And if any of these candidates fail to distinguish themselves in a meaningful way from Trump, Trump is going to benefit from there being so many people in the field. And if it was DeSantis versus Trump in a head-to-head matchup, I would get DeSantis's approach. But guess what, dude? It's not. You have all these other voices that you have to be distinguishing yourself from in some tangible, meaningful way. And just hoping that Trump gets in so much legal trouble that the GOP suddenly abandons him, it's not going to happen, because we've seen that Trump support has stayed rock solid. And if it's dipped at all, it's dipped a tiny, tiny bit, not enough to put DeSantis over the hill versus Trump in a potential matchup. So his strategy is not working, and when he's confronted on it, his talking point is to just go, oh, well, there's still a long ways away. The election's still 6 months. We need to fight for every vote. Dude, you have to, a 30-point gap between you and Trump, that cannot exist nationally, okay? A 30-point national margin is it's not gonna happen, dude, because even if you do good in Iowa, even if you do good in New Hampshire, when we start getting into these larger states, okay, that 30-point margin is going to be felt more and more and more as the race goes on. And yes, it's easier to make up a big margin of deficit and not being as recognizable as the lead candidate. It's easier to make up that deficit in Ohio and in New Hampshire, states with really small, really peculiar types of voters who are not like voters anywhere else in the country. Wow. Okay, so we're gonna cut off Ron there because he's just speaking a bunch of nonsense at this point. Yeah, I just do not get the why is Ron so willing to go against the corrupt agencies or whatnot, and the corrupt FBI or the corrupt DOJ, or I just don't get it. What I would be saying if I was Ron DeSantis here is I would be trying to consolidate support of the other candidates and say that no, Trump in fact did things wrong. Trump in fact messed up. Trump messed up when he took these documents out of Mar-a-Lago. It was irresponsible. It's unthinkable that somebody would do that. And if I was president, you wouldn't have to worry about me being ousted in a one-term presidency, but I would never, ever mishandle classified information in the way Trump did. And it's a real shame that he did what he did. Just say something like that. Like, what do you have to lose at this point? What do you have to lose? Okay? Some people will say, oh, well, you can't piss off the Trump people. You can't piss off... Ron DeSantis can't possibly anger the Trumpies because he needs Trumpy support in order to beat Biden, or he needs Trumpy support in order to win the nomination in the first place. And my answer to that is the Trumpies aren't, what he's doing right now is not working. The Trumpies aren't coming over to DeSantis in any sort of meaningful way. Sure, maybe one out of 10 of them might, or whatever, but it's not working out for you, Ron DeSantis. The polls are showing your strategy sucks. Your political thinking, your ability to run a campaign, your ability to distinguish yourself, it all sucks. It sucks, it sucks, it sucks. Why not try something else? Why not try something else just for the heck of it? I mean, what a waste of time. What a waste of money. What a waste of resources. And it's just like, why? Why continue to keep doing the same thing when it's not working? It's literally the definition of insanity. Okay, it's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So I think it's safe to say that Ron DeSantis is insane in how he's approaching his candidacy. So I got to ask David Packman a few questions about the 2024 presidential GOP primary, and he has some interesting insight on a few different questions I have for him. So let's go ahead and hear David Packman answer my questions that I had for him.
On the Howard Stern Sirius radio channels. It's going to air some.
Oh, sorry guys. I got to the wrong point here. Give me 1 second. I just got to find. I think it was right here.
Just curious because I know you cover a lot of this. Anyway, so yeah, big fan.
You are, quite frankly. There's that, and they're basically cult followers. We're now on the air. It is your turn to speak. Queenie, you probably have the wrong audio device selected, but if you select the right one, we will all be able to hear you. And last chance for Queenie to fix your audio. Okay. Let's go instead to Max from Albuquerque. Max from Albuquerque, welcome to the program.
Hey, David, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hey, man, I have some election-related questions for you here.
Okay.
I just want to get your opinion on a few different things. So why are Republicans following Trump to near certain political doom, considering the last outcome of the last 3 elections or so now here?
Most of the people that are still supporting Trump have not actually sat down and done the math you've done, which is, okay, in 2018, it didn't go so well. In 2020, it didn't go so well. And in 2022, MAGA didn't do so well. So they're just not thinking about it logically the way you are, quite frankly. There's that, and they're basically cult followers.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. And what right now, where are you at on your percentage of chance for Biden winning versus Trump?
I think if it's Biden, Trump, even money bet, I'm betting Biden. It's not like a gimme, but I would guess it's like, 55-45, Biden's going to come out ahead is my guess, assuming the economy is roughly the way it is today.
Got you. Okay, 55-45.
Yep.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
All right. And also, why doesn't DeSantis, in your opinion, take a more aggressive or just really any kind of different stance against Trump, given that he hasn't really risen in the polls and it's not really looking all that great for him? Do you think he's holding out hope that Trump's going to get in so much legal trouble that the Republicans suddenly turn away from him?
I think that is exactly what DeSanctimonious is doing, because you're right. He is criticizing Trump, but he's not criticizing him as hardcore as he could. DeSantis has 21% right now. We've got the poll up on the screen. Average of polls. DeSantis wants to be there in case Trump is so stuck in the mud with indictments and arrests and trials. And he doesn't want to attack MAGA too much because then they won't go to him if Trump bails or simply can't stay in the race. I think that's the shot he's taking, but donors are not thrilled and they're starting to pull their support. I think the DeSantis campaign may implode very soon.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, man. And one more, if you would.
Sure.
How much more of a percentage of a chance would you give a candidate like Tim Scott or Nikki Haley in a hypothetical matchup against Joe Biden if they were hypothetically to be the Republican nominee?
It's
or
so
would you give
hard
them
to say, and I'll tell you why it's so hard to say.
Got you.
Their polling support is so low that you get into the inaccuracy of small numbers when you do a poll that says Biden versus Haley or whatever. So I genuinely have no idea.
Gotcha. All right, thanks.
So that was David Packman's responses to my questions about the 2024 election. And really interestingly, he seemed to pretty much agree with my outlook on why DeSantis isn't attacking Trump as hard as he could be, because he's holding out hope that he's gonna, somehow Trump's gonna get in so much legal trouble that he's gonna be able to swoop in and just replace Trump in the eyes of your everyday GOP voter as being the leader of the party. But as we went over in the last segment, I don't think it's gonna work out. And interesting that David Packman is saying that he thinks that DeSantis' campaign might implode very soon. Crazy. Very soon to me. That means before the Iowa caucuses in January of next year. So yeah, thanks so much to David Packman for taking my call. It was great to talk to him and to hear his insight. Hearing him say that Biden's chances of winning were 55-45. That is not what I was hoping to hear from David. That the election is 55-45 if the economy stays the same. I mean, that is not very heartening to me at all to hear from David. I'd like to hear 80-20 or but I guess that's just where we're at right now, where we have so many Americans who they vote with their wallets, they vote thinking about their wallets anyways, not with their wallets, and they vote in terms of the economy that let's hope the economy stays good, people. Let's hope that there's not some unforeseen crazy event that hurts Americans to the point that they're willing to give fascism another shot. Because if Trump wins in 24, it's over. Okay, it's over for our country. It's over for American democracy. It's done, folks. Our whole history of a nation, we can kiss it bye-bye. Okay, and we can say hello to a new vision and a new world that we are living in if Trump somehow, some way defeats Biden. So 55-45, we need to work to get that number, in Pac-Man's mind at least, a lot higher of a chance of Biden winning. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, guys. I want to thank you for watching all the shows this week. And if you like the content, please be sure to like the video, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, and leave me a voicemail if you'd like. The link is going to be in the description. And yeah, leave me a voicemail. I'm going to be playing them live on the show in the next few weeks here. So again, thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and peace out.